Hi, Leticia. Thank you so much for joining me in this podcast episode. Really appreciate it. How are you doing today?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, the pleasure is mine. Super excited doing the podcast with you and learn more about yourself and also get to the topic, which is we're going to discuss competency of enlightenment. So yeah, before we get to the topic, I'd love to know more about you. Like, how did you get into like a business world and coaching and consulting?
Yes, so my name is Laetita Gnago. I have about 20 years of experience in the corporate world. I started in human resources and I soon realized there had to be more for me. And so I transitioned into talent development and organizational development, and I loved it. I've done everything from training professionals at all levels, from entry level all
Yeah.
the way to CEOs, etc. And so I got into the business world. I have an MBA, a business degree. So it kind of made sense for me to work in that field. And then I chose positions and jobs that would allow me to teach other people in some way. And in 2020, when the whole world sort of turned
Yeah.
on its heads, I decided to go out there and create a competency, which is the skill set of alignment, and offer that as an option for professionals to use and leverage in the corporate world.
Yeah, that's great. And a lot of people made it like a transition, isn't it? Like from corporate world to like starting their own business during the pandemic. It's
I
like
think something happened during that time that kind of some light bulbs went off for a lot of people, me
yeah.
included.
Yeah, because you're in a lockdown position, right? You can't really do much. You can't really interact and socialize, and that's give you like a more opportunity, like talking to yourself and creating like this is something I want to do with my life for rest of my year. Then yeah, you come up with like great ideas.
Exactly. And when you have time to spend alone, you
Mm.
reflect a lot on what you've learned. And it's a really good time for you to grow professionally and personally. And if you're lucky, you're able to merge the two and do something about it.
Yeah, definitely, totally agree with you. And I had like a lot of time I planned out I'm gonna start my podcast, but my business and everything kept me so busy and couldn't really had the time to actually focus on it until like 2020 when we locked down. Then I had a lot of time and like this is the time to get started, right? And yeah, everything has like a new beginning when you got more time on yourself, then you think like, yeah, this is I need to be doing right now.
Absolutely. And it's great because sometimes you're meant to do something,
Yeah.
but until you go into a different environment, you don't really see that happening for yourself. And so I think, as you said, 2020 was a catalytic year that kind of
Mm.
helped a lot of people through that process.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, let's talk about today's topic. We're going to talk more about it, which is like a competency of alignment. So why did you choose the topic and what it actually is?
Yes, so I chose this topic, alignment, because it's part of my passion. I
Yeah.
have worked, as I mentioned, for about 20 years in the corporate world, and I was lucky that I worked in different environments and different industry and
Mm.
at different levels. And when I was training professionals and I worked in organizational development, I realized that there are some people who tend to be more successful than others and stand out. They don't necessarily have the perfect situation, but when you compare them in terms of having the same or similar
Yeah.
level of experience and education and all of that, there's something that they seem to know that other people either don't know or are not applying in their careers. And so being exposed to all these different kinds of people, I started sort of thinking about, okay, what's the common denominator here? So
Mm.
that's when I developed the skill set of alignment. I didn't create alignment, it's there for everyone to
Yeah.
have access to. But because of my background in teaching in the corporate world, I thought more people need to have access to it. And so I developed courses and I wrote a couple of books. And I said, this has to be a competency that people can learn from and use it if it's going to help them. So that's the first part of your question.
Yeah.
The second part is alignment is a skill. So it's basically a state of being where things tend to make sense and fall into place, such as being at the right place at the right time around the right people. And it's the way in which we manage our circumstances that come to us, whether it's positive or not. But alignment doesn't mean necessarily perfection in terms of our experiences, right? Sometimes we have things that are happening that are not positive, but the way in which we show up in our organizations, the way in which we handle our situations, the good stuff and the bad stuff,
Yeah.
really can help us be perceived as more of a leader than somebody who isn't. So it's anything from leveraging impression management tools, positive psychology. You think about, being a self-replenisher and leveraging self-validation. And really, it's an inside job, so to speak, that each and every one of us is responsible for and accountable to. And so, in simple terms, it's a mindset perspective. It's a mentality that those amazing leaders that we see
Yeah.
have in their character, in their sense of pride, how they handle resilience. And it's really a unique quality that makes those successful people stand out. And so we tend to see that in their behaviors. And oftentimes when we interact with them, we feel kind of good, right? We know that there's psychological safety behind being close to this person.
Yeah.
And I can talk more about, their thought process, but generally that's what alignment is.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much for explaining. Like a lot of people didn't know about it. And so, yeah, our listeners mostly for entrepreneurs, small to medium-sized business owners, and they are like a great leaders on their
Mhm.
organization. So, using your methodologically and like and same process you work in your with your like your clients, your prospects. So, how do you implement on them my listeners' organization like alignment, and they can be like a great leader themselves?
Yes. So the first thing is to get rid of the scarcity mindset, which is the opposite of alignment. And the scarcity mindset basically says that there are not enough resources for everyone, and that if someone else is having something or access to something, that means they're either taking it away from us or that, we don't have enough to go around. And so people who think like that tend to be unhealthily competitive. And
Hmm.
so as a result of that mindset, they play those corporate games that some of us have been privy to,
Yeah.
and they end up being really good at it. And it is not their fault necessarily. It's not to judge where people are on their journeys, but a lot of times that's how they've been treated, and so they go around and return that because they think, okay, this is what works. This is how people get ahead. This is how in this culture or this environment. I can move forward. And as a result, they sort of do that. And it leads to a negative company culture.
Hmm.
And it is not a healthy environment for a lot of people, although they adapt. And so, for entrepreneurs and all professionals, really, they need to think of leveraging the skill set of alignment to strategically align with themselves first and invest in themselves so that when they see other people who are doing well and succeeded, they are not resenting them
Yeah.
for coming up with great ideas. They don't they don't think somebody else owes them something, and vice versa. They don't think they owe anything to anyone. They understand that we are all on our journeys to really make the most of our professional careers. And
Hmm.
so when we're okay with ourselves, we're okay with other people. Typically, those who tend to judge others the most have the most judgment towards themselves. And all of this is coming from some kind of trauma that they've experienced growing up. What we
Yeah.
don't realize is that we take ourselves with us everywhere we go. And if we haven't worked out some of those trauma or challenges that we've had, whether it's conscious or not, sometimes we're not ready. Sometimes it's what we know. Sometimes we don't even know about any of this. Not
Yeah.
everyone takes a psychology course, right? And so we tend to repeat these cycles over and over everywhere. And the thing is, we are the common denominator. And
Hmm.
it's not to judge ourselves. It's just, okay, if I keep having difficulties and challenges and my experience is not positive, what can I do so that I can sort of turn that around? And so that's where alignment is helpful because then we have a more meaningful experience. And what I really want to emphasize for people is this: when you're dealing with a problem that
Yeah.
you're trying to work through, um, typically, if the problem is small, it tends to match that level in terms of what happens to the way you're fixing it. When the problem is big, it's going to take a lot more to fix that problem, right? It's going to be taking a lot of more effort, more resources, more people involved, etc. And so we have to recognize that as a piece of how things really work. And so it's not about judging the situation. It's about,
Mhm.
okay, we assess where we are, we know what's going on. What can we do to turn that around?
Yeah. And do you think like changing them leaders in the organization, like they got to like alignment themselves, and how do you implement on their organization, like on the team members? Like, do you think it's gonna happen automatically, or someone need to be take a step and help their team members as well?
Well, one of the things that I think is part of my purpose is to make the skill set of alignment known to the entire corporate world, if that's at all
Yeah.
possible. So when people don't know something, they can't use it as a tool to fix
Hmm.
their problems, right? They're going to continue with what they have. And so people need training. That's the first step. They need to
Yeah.
have access to the information. And I forget who said this quote, but when you know better, you do better, right? And
Right.
so you have to have the information first. So people need to be trained on the concept of alignment as a competency and be able to leverage it as a skill.
Yeah.
And then when they are in the organization, it's not about taking people out. Although sometimes you have somebody who happens to be a tumor, they are the cancer in the organization, and
Mm.
if that person's gone, everything else kind of gets a little bit better. And that's the key. Every time you bring somebody else that's new in an organization, the dynamics are going to change with every new person, sometimes for the better, sometimes not so much. So there are people who are open, who can learn about the skill set, who are ready to grow and to expand. And if we can start with that, that's a good first step, because when their light bulb goes off,
Yeah.
they start operating differently. They stop seeing themselves as I'm going to say, victim. And instead of blaming everybody for all the problems that come up, and sometimes it's true that other people have a lot to do with our problems, but they start growing and realizing, okay, what can I do? What can I control? Because I
Mhm.
can't control what other people are going to do. I cannot control the choices they're going to make. I cannot control how they're going to react to certain things. So
Yeah.
what can I do to respond to situations instead of reacting to them, so that my experience is more simple, more soft, and is more about the greater good? But it starts with investing in ourselves by teaching ourselves those skill sets that may not have been available to us before.
Yeah, that's a great way to approach it, right? Like you can't really do like all organization because the organization could be like a so big, like a few hundred people, a few thousand people, depending where you are. If it's like a two, three people on an organization, it's so much easier to deal with your team, right? So like then obviously you comes up like if the organization is big or like I need help. So let's say like if someone hired you like for coaching them and consulting them, what do you help them the organization so with your step and formula for bringing the value to their company?
Yes. So I kind of want to talk to a point you just mentioned. It is very difficult when you're outnumbered,
Yeah.
when you're the only one, or there are just a few of you, and the people that you are dealing with have a lot of social influence in the organization. And
Mm.
that's why you have to invest in yourself first. For me, people find me on my website. And they can go to alignedcorporateexperiences.com or send me an email, and that would be at support at alignedcorporateexperiences.com to engage with me. And I will start with a consulting sort of meeting so that we can see where they are, where they want to be, and I can give them solutions and steps. I do, as I mentioned, I offer courses and books, and I have a
Yeah.
whole set of information that is available to them. And I can come and I can do sort of a presentation. They can check out my webinars, and then we can decide if we need to customize some other things to the culture of their organizations. Because as you
Mhm.
know, every place has its own culture, and
Yeah.
so we need to be able to address certain things. And so by partnering together is where we can move forward from there.
Yeah, and do you have like any kind of steps or like the commitment of like 2 months, 3 months it takes to like make the change, or do you think it varies from different company to company?
So it varies from company to company, but once they take my programs under 3 months, they can turn things around.
Hmm.
That is the value that they would get from working with me. It doesn't take years to get this stuff. It
Yeah.
gets, it's actually very simple. But once you understand people, human behavior, and all of that, then you start reflecting yourself, and then you start to exude different things and evoke different things from others as well.
Yes. Yeah, I really appreciate that. Thank you so much, Leticia. So you're coming to the end of this podcast. So those who's listening, if anyone wants to follow you or reach out to you, where's the best place? I know you mentioned your website. Do you have any social media or anything like that?
Yeah, so we are on Instagram, but go to my website, aligncorporateexperiences.com, and start from there. And I'm very excited and passionate about this topic, as you can tell. And
Yeah,
so,
definitely.
if you feel that your organization could use some of that, please reach out. You're going to be very happy at the results and the outcomes, and it won't take an entire year.
Yeah, thank you so much for your valuable time and yeah, explaining to this topic. I really appreciate it. So I hope you have like a wonderful day ahead and wonderful year ahead as well. And thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you, Marcel.
You're most welcome. So yeah, that's a wrap, guys. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. Those who's interested, learn more about the teacher's work and find out. So go visit her website and reach out to her if you need any kind of advice or help, any consultation. And yeah, I'll talk to you in the next episode. Thank you, everyone. Take care.